Right over here, in front of the flags. Two there. Come in close, don't be shy. Good morning, bonjour à tous. I'm Charlie Angus, Member of Parliament for Timmins James Bay, and very proud to be here on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. Last summer, over 200,000 Canadians were forced from their homes because of massive climate damage. In cities across North America, children could not go outside because of the risk to their health. The number of days where the smoke from burning wildfires was rated as extreme threat to human health lasted straight through the fall. Canada's oil and gas industry is not just killing the planet, the impacts are killing people. Every year, 34,000 people die prematurely in Canada from fossil fuel pollution. Globally, the numbers of pollution deaths are higher than the death rates from smoking. And yet, the oil and gas lobby continues to pump enormous sums into advertising campaigns to falsely claim the benefits of allowing even more burning of fossil fuels. Over the last 60 years, they've spent billions suppressing evidence of the damage that they are knowingly doing to our planet. They knew all along they were destabilizing our climate, putting our planet in a crisis from which we may not be able to recover. And now that the planet is on fire, they're shifting their propaganda with false claims of producing cleaner products, claiming they can be part of the climate solution. That's like Benson and Hedges telling you that they can help end lung cancer. This is because big oil has always relied on the big tobacco playbook of delay and disinformation. And so to tackle this immense threat to human health, we need to use many of the strategies that finally took down big tobacco. In 1997, the Canadian Parliament banned advertising from big tobacco because of the clear threat to human health. This is why I'm so proud to stand here today with representatives of Canada's medical community to state that the time has come to ban all oil and gas advertising. The big tobacco moment has finally arrived for big oil. Bill C-372 will, quote, provide a legislative response to a national public health and environmental problem of substantial and pressing concerns. The bill will make it illegal for big oil and gas lobby and the gas lobby or their front groups or paid influencers to falsely promote the burning of fossil fuels as a benefit to the public. The legislation will make it illegal to falsely claim that the use of one fossil fuel product is somehow better than another fossil fuel product in improving the environment. To claim that there are clean fossil fuels is like saying there are safe cigarettes. We know that is simply not true. Morgan Stanley points out that the damage from climate crisis for the North American economy in just 3 years has been a staggering $415 billion. And this legislation will target advertising that falsely claims that oil and gas are having a positive impact on the global economy. And we recently learned that toxic contamination from Canada's oil and gas industry is 6,000 times higher than officially reported. This legislation will make it illegal for Canada's oil and gas giants to falsely identify themselves with the health and positive lifestyles of Canadians or with reconciliation of Indigenous people on whose lands the toxic contamination is highest. The big tobacco moment has arrived for companies like Suncor, Imperial, and the oil and gas giants of Canada. La planète est en feu. La production des combustibles fossiles déstabilise notre climat et cause un impact énorme sur la santé des citoyens. Mais pendant des décennies, les géants pétroliers ont menti au public sur les dommages qu'ils causent à notre environnement. Les géants pétroliers ont dépensé des milliards de dollars en campagnes publicitaires mensongères pour saper l'action nécessaire pour protéger la planète. L'industrie des combustibles fossiles constitue une menace directe pour la santé humaine. Tout comme l'industrie du tabac, ils doivent être tenus responsables de leurs fausses déclarations. C'est pour cette raison-là, je suis ici pour présenter ce projet de loi 372 pour bloquer la campagne qui promeut la combustion des combustibles fossiles. On doit mettre fin à la campagne mensongère qui a compromis les actions visant à sauver notre planète. I'm very proud to turn the floor over now to Dr. Sehjal Bhargava, physician from here in Ottawa.
Bonjour, hello everyone. I'm happy to be able to join you today to put the full support of the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment behind the important legislation that Mr. Angus has introduced today. My name is Dr. Sehjal Bhargava. I'm a CAPE board member and a resident physician in family medicine and public health and preventive medicine at the University of Ottawa. My work as a physician involves caring for the young, elderly, as well as inner-city patients and immigrant and refugee families, groups who are typically the most vulnerable to the negative impacts of the climate crisis. I and other physicians bear witness to the on-the-ground impacts of the trends shown in research highlighting the crisis that we're in. CAPE has referenced over 30 recent studies in our backgrounder on this issue. We as doctors see the direct result of political inaction to curb the worsening health impacts of the climate crisis and fossil fuel pollution in patients who come to clinics and hospitals, who are struggling to breathe, children presenting with more asthma attacks than before, seniors with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease exacerbations presenting during wildfire season, people suffering from heat stroke or being diagnosed with cancers due to lifelong exposures to toxins in our water, soil, and air. The need for a fossil fuel advertising ban is clear and urgent. Every year, fossil fuel pollution is directly linked to 34,000 premature deaths in Canada and over 8 million deaths globally. Many more Canadians will continue to suffer the negative health impacts as a result of toxic emissions, including cancer, heart attacks, strokes, and other chronic disease exacerbations if no change is made. The United Nations has estimated that in 2018 alone, air pollution from fossil fuels caused $2.9 trillion in health and economic costs, which works out to a staggering $8 billion a day. Economics aside, the personal cost of climate-related events is significant. The heat dome in BC in 2021 claimed the lives of over 600 people, and the destruction of land, homes, and livelihood associated with floods and wildfires, which were the worst in history last year, will worsen if nothing is done to abate the impact of fossil fuel pollution. Today's private member's bill is an important step in addressing this national public health crisis and the campaign of disinformation from the oil and gas industry, which is making this problem worse. The bill responds to the CAPE-led campaign for a fossil fuel ad ban, which was launched 2 years ago in 2022, with a petition presented to Parliament and a letter to ministers backed by a broad coalition of over 35 organizations representing over 700,000 health professionals in Canada. We hope the proposition of this bill today stimulates conversations surrounding our country's dependency on fossil fuels and leads to policies that will change the behavior of those most responsible for the current crisis, the oil and gas industry. The federal government's top priority should be protecting Canadians' health, and fossil fuel companies should not be allowed to pollute our air the way they do, and certainly shouldn't be allowed to promote their harmful products and lie about the risks to Canadians who will pay for it with their quality and even length of life. We must end this practice now, and it begins with all party support of this private member's bill. The health and well-being of Canadians depends on it. Thank you, merci, and I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Émilie from the Canadian Association of Nurses for the Environment.
Bonjour tout le monde. Je suis heureuse de pouvoir me joindre à vous aujourd'hui pour apporter le soutien total de l'Association canadienne des infirmières et infirmiers pour l'environnement à l'important projet de loi que M. Angus a présenté aujourd'hui. Je m'appelle Émilie Tremblay, je suis infirmière autorisée et étudiante au doctorat à l'Université d'Ottawa. Au cours des dernières 50 années, de nombreuses études ont associé des niveaux élevés de pollution à une augmentation de mortalité et d'admission hospitalière pour des maladies cardiovasculaires et respiratoires. Ces maladies touchent de manière disproportionnée les personnes les plus vulnérables au Canada, surtout les enfants et les personnes âgées. Dans ma pratique, nous voyons de nombreux patients qui souffrent déjà des effets du changement climatique, qu'il s'agisse sur la santé physique ou mentale. Au cours de l'année passée, nous avons reçu un grand nombre d'appels pendant les incendies de forêt de l'été au Québec pour multiples problèmes de santé, notamment des troubles respiratoires. Une patiente a fait part à des difficultés respiratoires soudaines. Une tâche autrement simple, comme monter les escaliers de l'école primaire où elle travaillait, est devenue impossible. En tant qu'infirmière, il est inconfortable d'entendre quelqu'un s'essouffler et de se sentir impuissant parce que je sais que les effets du changement climatique ne feront que s'aggraver, surtout si nous ne changeons pas nos pratiques actuelles. La priorité absolue du gouvernement fédéral devrait être de protéger la santé des Canadiens. Les géants des combustibles fossiles ne devraient pas être autorisés à promouvoir leurs produits nocifs et ensuite mentir sur les risques qu'ils font courir aux Canadiens qui en paieront les prix, dont beaucoup verront leur santé se dégrader, voire leur vie. Merci. Thank you. Nous allons maintenant entendre Leah de l'Association canadienne des médecins pour l'environnement.
Thank you. We launched the Fossil Fuel Ads Make Us Sick campaign 2 years ago because the amount of misinformation being spread by big oil is out of control. And because, as my colleagues attested to, the health and environmental impacts of fossil fuels are irrefutable. Given the harms that fossil fuel cause, from local pollution to global climate change, and in line with the commitment of Canada and the rest of the world to transition away from fossil fuels, it is negligent to promote and stoke demand for these harmful products and industries. Faced with a similar public health crisis, restrictions on tobacco advertising and sponsorship worked to discourage smoking and end the deception of the tobacco industry. Health workers were key in advocating for these restrictions that have saved countless lives, leading to a reduction in smoking from almost 50% of adults in 1965 to 1 in 10 in 2020. A fossil fuel ad ban can be a similar tipping point in the transition away from fossil fuels. Secondly, this bill will help address greenwashing. No one should be allowed to deceive Canadians, especially when their health is at stake. For decades, fossil fuel companies have used the same playbook as big tobacco to deceive the public. For example, the 6 largest oil sands companies have created the group Pathways Alliance and launched a multi-million-dollar campaign claiming that the oil sands can be net zero. This is false. Oil can never be net zero because 80% or more of the life cycle emissions are released when oil is burned. Meanwhile, a report released last week by Yale and Environment Canada found that actual emissions of the oil sands production were as much as 64 times higher than those reported by the industry. That's not a rounding error. That's negligence. Any product that was 60 times worse for you than its producer claimed would be taken off the shelves. Healthcare workers have brought 3 cases of such greenwashing by the fossil fuel industry to the Competition Bureau. All 3 of these cases are currently under investigation by the Government of Canada for misleading advertising. But these cases drag on for years. Meanwhile, fossil fuel companies continue spreading climate disinformation, emitting deadly levels of pollution, and prioritizing their own profits over public interest. We cannot reach our climate goals without dismantling the powerful interests and influence of the fossil fuel industry. The third reason we need this law is that we're falling behind like-minded countries that are already taking action to protect their citizens and spur green innovation. France banned fossil fuel ads in 2022. Countries such as the Netherlands and the UK are proactively pursuing false claims of carbon neutrality, and the EU has a greenwashing law to empower consumers for the green transition. Canada is lagging. The evidence is clear and other countries are taking action. Canada needs to take decisive measures to catch up, starting with supporting this bill. Thank you. I will now turn to Jennifer Smith from the parents groups For Our Kids and Mères au Front.
En tant que parent, j'adore explorer la nature avec mes enfants. En grandissant, je n'aurais jamais pu imaginer un avenir au Canada où nous devrions garder nos enfants à l'intérieur en raison de la pollution de l'air et de la fumée des feux de forêt. Mais c'est la réalité à laquelle les familles sont désormais confrontées à travers le pays. Last year, fossil fueled climate change contributed to more than 18 million hectares burning in Canada, the worst fire season ever recorded. 1 in 4 Canadians was directly impacted by forest fires and extreme weather events. Yet the industries causing this destruction continue to promote a fossil fuel-dependent economy. Meanwhile, fossil fuel emissions are having direct impacts on our health. Canada now has the 3rd highest global rate of new childhood asthma cases from traffic pollution, following Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates. My son is among those cases. He wore a mask as we walked to his first day of day camp because of the smoke-laden air. The next week, I ran with his sister through a torrential downpour under a tornado watch. Ils étaient effrayés. En tant que mère, je les ai rassurés en leur disant que ce n'était pas normal, tout en redoutant que cela ne devienne notre nouvelle réalité. Ce n'est pas la normalité que nous voulons pour nos enfants. En tant que parents, c'est notre devoir de garantir à nos enfants un avenir viable dans un monde sûr et sain. This is why I'm here today to urge all members of Parliament to take this responsibility seriously and support the important measures being brought forward today. This is a concrete, cost-effective, and meaningful action that the government can take today to help ensure a livable future for our kids. Thank you. Merci.
Any questions?
Yeah, Mark Ramsey of the Toronto Star. I'm curious, there is, in the provisions in the legislation, there is something that says that any advertising from fossil fuel companies that promotes fossil fuels as good for the economy is part of the ban. Doesn't that make this kind of an effective, complete ban on fossil fuel advertising, or could you kind of clarify that?
Well, absolutely. We're dealing with an industry that has used every possible disinformation trick. And what we've seen since the climate catastrophe has been unfolding, the messaging has shifted. That, you know, you can see it outside Parliament here. They'll say, as long as the world is using oil and gas, shouldn't it be Canada and Canadian oil and gas, meaning increasing production, meaning increasing export, that it is a benefit, that we need it. When we see that, you know, the International Energy Agency has been very clear that around the world there's been a massive shift to renewables and to clean energy. But the messaging, and you see it particularly here in Ottawa because they're trying to influence politicians to falsely accept the premise that we need to not only continue, but massively expand production because it will benefit the economy. The damage that's being done to our economy is enormous. And I was just talking to a business this morning in Northern Ontario. This past summer, they were heavily damaged from lack of tourists because of smoke. Now they're suffering because we don't have enough snow on the ground from the hottest January ever. So that's the damage that's being done to the economy.
And Natasha Bilowski, Canada's National Observer. Question for you, Charlie. I'm wondering, you know, I know this bill was sort of just introduced, but have you seen any MPs from other parties indicate support for it as of yet?
One of the great things about having such great expertise here today with the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment is that they are starting to meet with MPs from all parties. The step from having launched the bill is now the campaign to bring support across party lines. And I think it's going to be really hard for MPs to say after what they saw last summer, after we almost lost Kelowna, after we almost lost so many other communities, for an MP not to recognize the need to take action.
And a follow-up for someone from Cape, would the comparison between sort of trying to get tobacco ads banned, you know, we talk a lot about the similarities, that's a lot of what I hear. What are some of the differences, though, in how you may have had to sort of change the approach in trying to push for this ban?
Sure. Yeah, so there are some differences, as you mentioned, and also the similarities that we've laid out. One of the main differences is that smoking primarily hurts the smoker and, you know, those in their household. The difference with fossil fuels is that we know that, as we mentioned, those most vulnerable and those who are suffering the greatest impacts are vulnerable communities, children, Indigenous populations, and of course, those most vulnerable are future generations. So, you know, for smoking, those, you know, the passive smokers are about 10% of the cases of lung cancer. Of course, the greatest impacts of the fossil fuel pollution are really experienced by future generations. A second difference, of course, is that, you know, fossil fuels currently are an integral part of our daily lives. We know that we are continuing to use fossil fuels. However, we have a societal commitment to begin a transition away from fossil fuels. So there is no reason to continue to promote fossil fuels. And in order to make this change, we've had a very difficult time in Canada to make this shift away from the fossil fuel era. And moving away from advertising is a key element in stopping the promotion of fossil fuels. You know, I live in Montreal. I have a coal shed in the back of my house. So we don't look back and say, oh, you know, what was that shift? How did we should still be using coal to heat our homes. The reality is that we know that better alternatives out there. And Canadians, because of the fossil fuel influence, are not getting the information they need. It's still hard today to really find out about alternatives such as heating your home with heat pumps. So there's a big lack of information. There's also a lot of climate disinformation that is severely slowing down our capacity to move away from health-harming fossil fuels.
One of the differences when we looked at the legislation, we modeled this legislation very closely on how big tobacco was taken down. We didn't want to go the competition route. We wanted to use the same tactic on the issue of health. There are a few differences. One of the differences is that with tobacco, it was very much about brand. You know, Rothmans was better than Benson and Hedges. I don't think anyone's going to say Suncor is better than Imperial. So we moved away from the brand. But the real major difference that we tried to focus on, and this is where we identified a number of the things that they're promoting, is that what they're saying is that they're part of a solution when they are the problem. And this is the shift in advertising. We've seen this advertising for 60 years of denial, of lies. They knew 60 years ago they were burning the planet. So they created disinformation, doubt. Now they're saying we've got clean fuels. That clean fuels we see with the LNG claims, it's simply false. It's like saying we're going to put a filter on your cigarette and your kids can smoke it and they'll be okay. So we had to focus on the larger industrial falsehood that's being promoted.
David Thurton from CBC. You brought up disinformation. I'm just wondering, and I'm just throwing this out to anyone, is the disinformation when it comes to climate change just coming, in your view, from the fossil fuel industry, or are you seeing other foreign state actors who are trying to undermine, whether it's the transition, electric vehicles? Do you worry about that as well?
The issue of disinformation is, I think, a real serious impediment to change. One has to only to post about EVs online, and you'll suddenly see tons of trolls attacking and claiming that this technology doesn't work, that it's going to catch fire, that it's a threat. The troll campaigns. Whenever we speak about health and petroleum products, immediately there's a massive bot farm troll machine. But the disinformation campaign was created by big oil. It was created by big oil decades ago when they knew. In 1988, Shell had a report that said that the damage to the planet would become identifiable by 2000, and it may be too late. Shell immediately went out and raised their drilling platforms in the ocean by 6 feet to get ready for the collapse of the ice shelves. And then they went and spent billions, along with the other big oil companies, claiming doubt, claiming that it wasn't certain, that the science wasn't clear. So they've shifted this strategy all along. So the disinformation right now is that, you know, the world needs more of our fuel, that our fuel is the cleanest, when it's just simply false. And we actually now see it being mirrored within the politics of Canada. Disinformation is being promoted as though this is some kind of woke agenda. So the reality is, I think that ordinary people know is that their kids can't go outside without choking on toxic fumes. That's something average people understand, no matter what the disinformation machine says.
But do you think there's foreign state actors doing this? We know that Ukraine, Russia has weaponized fuel. They're one of the largest petroleum producers in the world. Do you see maybe foreign state actors aiding and abetting the fossil fuel companies, whether intentionally or unintentionally?
That's a really, really good question. I think it needs further examination. But what we do know is that companies like Suncor and Imperial have played their role in disinformation. And once we start to deal with their millions that they pump in with falsehoods, and all their front companies or their front influencers, once we've dealt with that, I think it'll be clear whether or not there's other state actors or other groups. But we need to take what we can see right now, which is the paid influencers, the front groups, and the campaign that's being led out of the boardrooms in Canada and in Houston, Texas.
Quickly just ask, I know probably there's questions on the phone, is it really fair to say that Pathways, their claims are disinformation? And I mean, they're making claims for net zero. These are future claims. They're yet to be proven.
They're expanding.
Perhaps they could develop a strategy where they could get to net zero, and we will need oil past 2050 for our single-use, not just single, hopefully not single-use plastics, but our plastics that we're going to be using, you know, for multiple uses, is what I'm trying to say. So is it really fair to call that disinformation?
It is fair to call those claims misleading. Firstly, making future claims actually cannot be true. You cannot say that you're going to be net zero by 2050 if you don't have a clear evidence plan to back it up. And they have not shown that plan. The ads that they show, the ads that they are spending millions plastering on buses around the country, on Air Canada flights, on the radio, newspapers until this day. We published an op-ed 2 days ago. It was surrounded by a Pathways Alliance ad. So these claims they are based on technologies which are not proven at scale. They are, as you said, based on future projections with plans that have not been provided nor verified. That is the essence of greenwashing. They use generic terms such as net zero, such as carbon neutral, are now no longer being allowed to be used by companies in the EU because they are, by their nature, misleading. Their statement, their plan includes a disclaimer that is more than 500 words long. I can share this disclaimer with you. Their plan is very dependent on taxpayer dollars. Without that funding, they clearly state in their disclaimer that it would not be able to go forward. And beyond this, I mean, another problem with greenwashing is that similar to other claims of, a product, if you buy a razor, you can test if it works. The consumer has the information to be able to verify some of those claims. When it comes to greenwashing, it is well beyond the knowledge of a consumer to understand the nature of claims and to verify them. They simply don't have the information. So we have been advocating for the last 2 years for robust laws against greenwashing, and very little progress has been made.
One more question.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Just on a totally different talk, if I could get you, Angus, we saw the reporting in the Globe about, I think even Rebel News, about Yaroslav Hunker receiving an invitation to the Ukrainian president's address, Zelensky's address to Parliament from the Prime Minister's office. The Prime Minister's office has confirmed that that invitation was sent out by them. Is there any reaction to that now that we know that somehow the Prime Minister's office was involved in him attending some of the events associated with the President's visit? Maybe not Parliament in particular, but he did receive an invite to the event in Toronto.
The Prime Minister really needs to explain how this was allowed to happen. I think we were all embarrassed, and we were embarrassed internationally by the Speaker inviting this man to the House and recognizing him at the time when he was recognized. Many of us didn't quite hear the history of this person, but for the Prime Minister to invite a man whose history was that he was in the Waffen-SS, that was the Nazi murder machine, to invite him without doing due diligence, I think the Prime Minister needs to explain how the hell that happened. Thank you.
More questions? No?
C'est ça?
This concludes the press conference. Thank you very much, Mr. Bucco.
Thank you very much.